So we're beginning our unit on cellular reproduction, and we're going to be talking about two different processes in which different types of cells reproduce. And those two processes are called mitosis and meiosis. And this presentation is going to be about the process of mitosis. And mitosis is a type of cell division, and it has some specific functions, and one is for growth of cells and organisms, repair of cells within organisms, and reproduction. Now, mitosis, it's important to keep in mind that mitosis is an asexual reproduction. And again, this is coming back to homeostasis. And if you'll recall, homeostasis is the maintenance of internal stable conditions. And mitosis helps with homeostasis in organisms through growth and repair, in particular in multicellular organisms. And mitosis is a form of asexual reproduction in unicellular organisms. So single-celled organisms, they reproduce asexually. Before we start talking about the process of mitosis, we need to kind of introduce a couple of key terms so that we don't get too confused. And the first is chromosome. Now, you'll remember from our DNA unit that the double helix strand of DNA gets tightly wound up into a structure called a chromosome. And so a chromosome is a tightly wound strand containing a portion of a cell's DNA. No one chromosome contains all of a cell's DNA, unless that organism's DNA is very short. In most organisms, they have multiple chromosomes to contain all of the DNA. And a chromatid is two genetically identical arms of a chromosome, and they're sometimes called sister chromatids. So we can see in this picture this whole X-shaped structure. This is a chromosome. And this is a chromosome that has been duplicated or replicated. And so it is made up of two chromatids, and the yellow chromatid is genetically identical to this blue chromatid. And this occurs during one of the phases of mitosis, this DNA replication. The other thing we need to talk about is the homologous chromosome. And homologous pairs of chromosomes it's a pair of chromosomes that contain the same gene, one from the mother and one from the father. Now, each chromosome might have multiple chromosomes, but those chromosomes match within those homologous pairs. So if you look at these two pictures of homologous chromosomes, you'll see that they're the same size, they're the same shape, because yes, chromosomes can come in different shapes, and they carry genes for the same trait, but they don't necessarily have the same choices, so they're not identical. So this homologous pair of chromosomes might have the gene that carries eye color, and one chromosome came from the father and one came from the mother, and so one might have a brown chromosome for eye color and the other might have a blue chromosome for eye color. So they're not identical, but they carry the same genes. And then before we talk about mitosis, we need to understand that mitosis is just one of the steps in a process called the cell cycle. And the cell cycle is the growth and division of a cell. And there are 3 steps. There's interphase, mitosis, and cytokinesis. And interphase is this first stage of the cell cycle. And it's the stage before cell division takes place. And during this phase, the cell grows, copies its DNA, and prepares to divide into 2 cells. And mitosis is the second stage of the cell cycle. And during this stage, the cell's nucleus divides into 2 nuclei and produces 2 daughter cells that have identical DNA. And there are 4 stages to mitosis, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And cytokinesis is that third and final stage of the cell cycle. And during cytokinesis, each daughter cell has the same number of chromosomes as the parent cell. And its DNA is identical to the parent cell, and the daughter cell's DNA is identical to each other. And then that whole cycle starts over again. Once the cell is finished with cytokinesis, it moves back into interphase, where it starts to grow and develop. Okay, now we want to talk about the stages of mitosis, and there are 4. And we can remember their order by this acronym, or this little phrase up here, PMAT. Just remember PMAT to help you remember the phases. And the first phase is prophase, followed by metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. So PMAT. And you can see in the pictures of these different phases, which we're going to talk about individually. Now remember, moving into mitosis, the cell was in interphase, and now it moves into mitosis, and the first stage is prophase. And this is the stage when the chromosomes first become visible. And the nuclear membrane starts to dissolve. So the nucleus used to be surrounded by a membrane, just like the cell. And you can see in this picture the dotted line, that nuclear membrane is dissolving. And these little structures, those green structures, are called centrioles, and they start to form and they start to move towards opposite sides of the cell, and they're going to help that cell divide. And during metaphase, the chromosomes line up in the center or middle of the cell. Think metaphase, middle. They both begin with M. So you can see in this picture the centrioles, those little orange things. Now in this picture they're orange. They've moved to opposite sides of the cell, and the chromosomes have lined up in the center of the cell. And during anaphase, the cell begins to divide. There are spindles, these thread-like structures that come out from the centrioles, and they attach to the chromosomes, and they start to pull those chromatids apart towards opposite ends of the cell. So if you could think anaphase, away. And finally we have telophase. During telophase, it's during this phase, it's kind of intermixed with cytokinesis. Cytokinesis means like cell change or movement. And we're seeing that the nuclear membrane starts to reform and the two cells are fully formed. So that one cell has split into two daughter cells. And those daughter cells are genetically identical to the parent and to each other. Okay, so now let's play a little game. We're going to name the stages of mitosis. Well, if we look here, we've got chromosomes lined up in the middle. And if we remember, middle is metaphase. Well, we see here, it looks like this cell has kind of divided into two cells that now has the membrane between the cells. And we can kind of, if you use your imagination, especially on the left one, you can kind of see a nuclear envelope starting to form again. So this would be telophase or telophase. There are now two cells. And here in this phase, we can see there's still a nuclear envelope, but it's starting to dissolve. Chromosomes have formed, and you can kind of see centromeres, those kind of grayish areas on either side of the nucleus. Those have formed and they've moved to the opposite sides of the cell. So this would be prophase. And finally, you can, in this cell, you can see the chromosomes are being, or the chromatids have separated, and they're being pulled towards opposite ends of the cell. They're being pulled away from each other. So that is anaphase. All right, so that concludes our presentation on mitosis. And tomorrow we will be covering meiosis. So stay tuned for that video.